They rally around the family with a pocket full of shells. This week we're doing Evil Empire by Rage Against the Machine.
Sounds like you really meant that.
He did.
I did. I gave it.
Welcome to the Essential Albums Podcast, where three guys from 85 have a conversation about some of the biggest albums ever and forgotten favorites from yesteryear. We'll dive into an album's place in culture, discuss its merits, and decide if a record holds up and it's worth your time. Of course, we get into a lot more than just that, so join longtime friends Ryan, Gordon, and Anise, reliving some of these classics and diving into our new favorite albums. So, this week we got, if you haven't figured it out, did we already announce it? I don't know.
Whatever.
Evil Empire.
Evil Empire, yeah. So,
we should probably start getting to some of those forgotten favorites. Any of those yet?
They're coming. They're forgotten.
I guess we even forgot. We'll do them eventually.
Yeah.
It's a forgotten favorite like Interpol? Not forgotten?
Well, we talked about Interpol once before. Let's not bring that up again.
They were mentioned. All right, so I guess we can kick it off by asking, what's your relationship with Rage Against the Machine? I know, given the circumstances over the summer and stuff like that, and we've had a Rage episode on our radar. So how have you guys been listening to Rage lately?
I've just kind of always listened to them. It's nothing, I don't know, for me, I know they have like all the political lyrics and their whole presence is all political, but you know, getting into them as a young kid, it wasn't all politics. It was just the music. And for me, it's, you know, on a day-to-day basis, when I'm putting on Rage Against the Machine, it's just more about the music before the message. Not maybe that sounds bad, but
no, that's kind of like unique about them. They made political statements like fun and energetic, and where you're not really thinking about the political statement. I don't know, like.
Yeah. That's the thing, like they brought stuff to light for me, but and stuff that I read about when I was in like high school and college and stuff, you know, different causes they were bringing up. And I remember they had like reading lists and all this stuff. And I thought that was all cool that they were bringing light to a bunch of stuff. And I do agree with a lot of their politics and a lot of their views, but that's not why I go to them. It's not like, you know, politically driven reasons. It's more like, hey, I'm like driving to go play hockey. I need some energy. Or, hey, I'm partying with some friends, I'm gonna throw in some Rage.
Right, yeah. So
you're a 90s kid.
Yeah.
I don't think I can't think of another band that's on the radio, at least from our generation, that was that political, but also so popular. Like, and people don't really talk. I mean, generally, people don't. The first thing they talk about when they talk about Rage is not the political side of it.
Well, I guess like Tom Morello has addressed it. He said it's almost like they try to, you know, trick you with their music to bring you in.
Right. Yeah. Because
their music is so cool and interesting, and then once you're in, it's like, oh, there's this whole other world that's there as well, and people go to them for different reasons. And you know, more recently, you know, different politicians and stuff who didn't agree with their politics were citing them and all this stuff. But again, that goes back to the whole thing where people, it's just good music, whether you agree with politics or not.
Yeah, just to add on that, like, I mean, like rally around the family with a pocket full of shells, like people are singing along to that, or like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. Like, you may not know the full context of what they're trying to say, but like those, like you got right wingers, you got left wingers saying like, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. And they're chanting that. So it's like, it resonates with everybulate.
Yeah, because their lines are generic enough that it can be applied to
misused, I guess.
That's true. Yeah. Manipulate. Like, they're not overtly, this is our message.
Yes.
So yeah, it can get twisted.
But yeah, just going back, my relationship was just, you know, I listened to their music. I, you know, listened to all three albums, I'd say kind of equally. I have songs on different playlists on my Spotify.
All three?
Yeah, all three albums.
All three? We're going to ignore that out of the
three. It's three, and then the song from Godzilla, and that was it.
Nothing else happened.
For me, I guess over the summer, just to kind of add on, over the summer, I did listen to a lot more because I knew we wanted to do a Rage episode. And then funny, I was just doing some research, getting ready for this episode. Apparently, they re-entered like the Amazon or Apple top 30 for hard rock over this, like right around June, when the George Floyd Black Lives Matter was taking off. So they re-entered it, and their first album re-entered the top 200 on the Billboard chart. So I mean, it does, these kind of movements and stuff do pick up. But like you guys, I'm not really. I did listen to these guys before, but I didn't get into them until I guess the late 90s. Like for me, it was Guerrilla Radio. That was my entryway into like Rage. Yeah.
I think my entryway was Evil Empire. Like when Bulls on Parade came out, that was probably the first song I heard by them.
Yeah. Yeah, Bulls on Parade was my thing too. I mean, my first introduction through the radio. I'm like, oh, it's a really cool rockin' song, whatever. But it was Battle of Los Angeles before I really got like deep into Rage. I didn't have Evil Empire until later. It was more like, I don't know, it was the perfect album at the right time because I had just started like a paper route delivering like flyers early in the morning. But at the same time, I had this Battle of Los Angeles. It was the only thing like keeping me awake in some god awful early morning hour, like 7 a.m. or something for a kid. The Rage, that energy kept me going.
Yeah, I remember when like my first experience with that. Well, I was getting to that question. Like my first experience with this album specifically, I remember Bulls on Parade just being on Much Music and just sort of being. I didn't really know what to think of it at the time. I didn't really listen to anything that aggressive. Mind you, I was only like 10 years old, like 10, 11 years old. So I didn't really, it was just sort of an eye-opening thing. And that was the same year that this album came out and Tool's Anima came out. And I guess like Metallica was getting played because their Load album came out. So all this like more heavier stuff is getting played on like Much Music in the radio. So that's kind of my first introduction to like the more heavier side of things. And I remember listening to the album because my cousin had it before I had it, and that was and it was like, whoa, this album's good. It made me appreciate Bulls on Parade even more. It wasn't like a slap in the face for a 10-year-old. It took me a little bit to kind of fall in love.
Yeah, well, for sure, because this album came out April 16th, 1996. So for me, like the hardest things I was listening to like around 96 would have been like Smashing Pumpkins, Hole, Nine Inch Nails, I guess a little bit, Nirvana. So like this stuff was just like a little bit too hard for me. So that's why towards like, unfortunately, the new metal era for me, the late 90s, I was more welcoming of these guys. And then that's why Battle of Los Angeles fits for me.
Yeah. So is it, like in terms of your relationship with like rap music, where does this sit? Like, because Rage Against the Machine kind of like helps open that door for me because, you know, it was like a bridging band between the rock world and, well, rap. He's not singing.
Well, I know for me, I was kind of like in my younger ages, I was listening to more of like the pop rap stuff like Tony Tone and stuff like that. So I was kind of more, I wasn't against hip hop or anything. It wasn't my first introduction. But yeah, I was kind of more closer to the age where I was kind of trying to, you know, you're kind of more open to different genres of music, especially like you're in around the time we're kind of
like junior high, I guess.
Yeah, junior high. So you're kind of, you know, trying to listen to everything, see what your tastes are.
Yeah.
So I was listening to a lot of hip hop at the time, but I was listening to some.
Yeah, I mean, to answer that, oh, sorry, Ryan, just to answer your question, I was more in the rock vein. Like, I mean, for me, it was probably like Fugees was kind of like a big rap album, but like, I wasn't that big into rap. So to me, I always saw these guys more as just like a hard rock band.
Yeah, okay. For me, like the musical element of just the fact that he's rapping was a big thing because like I wasn't listening to any rap before this. And I kind of like just steered away from it. But I was here then rapping along with Rage Against the Machine. It's like the first rhymes I ever busted were Rage rhymes. So
I guess I guess like when I was younger I'd sing along with those songs. But yeah, it was more just the aggressiveness of the rapping, I guess, was more of a change of pace for me because before that it was all the more, you know, Vanilla Ice MC style of rapping.
Yeah. And this was like, you know, hits us right at angsty early teen years, so it's like you know,
this is like pre-teenage years for us, at least when this was coming out. The fact that this was being played on the radio is actually kind of like on Much Music getting regular because the generation after this was getting shoveled, you know, more of the teen. That's when all the teeny like Britney Spears and stuff came out.
Post grunge for sure.
Yeah.
Didn't those things always coexist though? I just feel like that's our own history.
They did, but in that part of the 90s, I guess it was more, especially like with the explosion of Nirvana and like alternative rock and stuff like that. It was a lot of rock music was going on.
Yeah, I guess so. I just don't know how to measure that. Like, isn't there just as much rock music going on right now?
Madonna still existed and Michael Jackson still existed, and they were releasing music.
That's true.
So there was still pop, but I'm thinking more just like for us, the Much Music or MTV era it seemed like it was rock music and then became hip hop and pop, or went pop, hip hop, or whatever. But at this time, it was like Rage Against the Machine was being played beside Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana, and this is the stuff you were seeing on. Like,
rock is definitely mainstream. Like around this time, you had like the huge Nirvana bump, and then the post grunge, and then it gave way to like, I mean, the traditional acts that you see, like I guess, Britney Spears, and you see more hip hop getting involved in the mainstream.
So that's not the way I see it. I kind of see it as like, that was the 90s were the last era where you could have like these distinct warring factions of like rock versus pop. But after that, like once the internet kind of became, everyone had it and you can get any music, that whole infrastructure crumbled. And the only successful artists that the record labels would employ are like your teeny bop stars, because they had no risk with hiring those. But they're not going to like sign some Nirvana like bunch of drug addicts or anything like that. So you don't have that rock music world versus the pop, because everything's been destroyed.
Well, nowadays you have to kind of grow everything authentically unless you want a label to take over. And then when a label takes over, they're gonna. This is a bigger conversation, but when a label takes over, they're going to make something that's more generic to get as many people listening to it.
No, I would say that's not how it is anymore, because now if you're right, you have to grow it organically first. And if a label sees you growing organically, they're like, well, these guys are doing something right. Let's just like buy them out.
Then there's also industry plants where they seem like they're growing organically, but the music industry's helping them out along the way.
That's true.
But whatever, that's a bigger conversation. At the time, this was like I was saying, I feel like this was the gate year that led. We'll get into this more when we talk about their legacy, but just in '96 we had, like I said, the kind of heavier stuff being played regularly on Much Music, like Rage, like Tool, like Marilyn Manson, and even and then 2-3 years later, that's when you start getting your Korns and Limp Bizkit being played, and they're fully embracing like the rap mixed with the rock and
Southern California or California hard rock.
You can also attribute a lot of the hardcore screamo stuff that was growing as well to Rage as well, because Rage had those hardcore elements in their music from the first album to Evil Empire and continuing forward. It always had that element as well. So it seemed like they brought a lot of elements that later on became more predominant in the mainstream.
So can we blame nu metal on Rage? Like, did they start that train?
I think there's a lot that goes into it. You gotta look back at like Faith No More and stuff like that as well that was going on.
There's no heavy guitars with Faith No More. There's no like no power chord drop keys.
It's not like Rage gets as heavy as a lot of the nu metal bands, as Korn or anything like that. But
I don't know. Well, I guess they don't tune the bass that low.
I don't think Rage has any songs with turntables or scratching or anything like that. Well, maybe scratching, but not turntables.
Guitar.
That's the whole thing. A lot of the solos, especially on this album, like Bulls on Parade, is a perfect example where the solo is pretty much just trying to mimic turntables. And I love it, and it's great and amazing.
All right, well, we'll get into some song questions in a moment. But so, what was your first experience? I guess this was an East pick. So, your first experience, was it through Much Music, like music videos, or what was your first experience?
That's what I was just kind of saying. I was like, Bulls on Parade on Much Music. My cousin had the album, so that's the first time I listened through that album was through my cousin, and that's where I was kind of made me gain more respect for Bulls on Parade when I kind of knew the context of the band. And, at that point, I remember Much Music would do Intimate and Interactive. Not Intimate and Interactive. They do a spotlight on a band and play older songs. So then I got to hear songs from the first album. And I'm like, oh, they had music before that was also good. This is before the internet where you could just hop on and discover.
Your source, yeah,
my source was Much Music. They were
Me too, buddy. Me too.
But yeah, then I got the album through Columbia House. So, and then I had it, and I would pretty much listen to it consistently, and ever since, almost. Is that sad? Is that good?
It's timeless because the grooves aren't dated. Nothing about it is really dated because nothing really came after it that, copped it exactly. You know what I mean? There wasn't like a flurry of copycat bands that made it, there's that Rage sound. It's really just up to Rage. So, it never got worn out.
Yeah. Like you saw remnants afterwards, like you could say like elements of Refused you can see in Rage. And then there's elements of some of the new metal stuff you can see in Rage. And there's elements of Glassjaw or whatever you can see in Rage. But none of them really sound like Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine is their own thing, and those bands are their own thing. But
it almost seemed like it was in their own time too, because like after Battle of Los Angeles, it's like Zach forgot how to write lyrics and the angst was gone, and I don't know, they just started covering old funk tunes. So
I think it's just more infighting, because I've always thought of that too. I'm like, these guys haven't released stuff like they've had over the last 20 years. There's been so much material, and I think it's just more that they just don't get along and they'd rather just tour with the stuff that they already have.
Oh really? Yeah, maybe. But I always heard it was Zach's like would take forever. At least that was Tom Morello blaming Zach for writing lyrics too slowly. I don't know.
At least had 20 years.
For me though, I feel like as bad as this sounds, because you can say like, oh, I want as much music from my favorite bands ever, but it's something we've revisited a bunch of times with a lot of bands, how we lose interest over time, or the music we feel diminishes, or it changes to the point that it's not really the band anymore, which is fine. But the fact
that would happen with Renegades? Sorry to interrupt.
No, but Renegades was a covers album. That's
okay. It's a little different.
But just going back to those, like the 3 albums where there were original songs that they were writing, it's a great stretch of 3 albums. Like I couldn't ask for more. There's great songs. Yes, they could continuously write different songs, better songs, but we got Audio Slave. Zach released like One Day Is a Line. We got other projects. They came back to further stuff. I'm not saying I would be opposed to more Rage music, but I'm saying the fact that it's 3 albums in like a 9-year span, like all pretty much contained to the 90s, it makes it kind of special to a time, a place, a political movement or whatever that they tried to grow. And I don't know, it kind of makes it special that it's only contained to those 3 in a weird way.
In my mind, I kind of picture them like going to like the political movement side of it. I always picture them now, like, since they're kind of like, they haven't released anything new original content since 1999. I see them now as like a decentralized unit where they're like, hey, let's just throw a show together. Let's get the permits and like, cool, let's throw a free concert. And they can just do that. And everybody's, because they're more of it seems like they're a brand or a movement now than they are about like making new content.
Yeah.
I had a realization today because when they announced that tour in 2020 that ended up getting canceled due to the pandemic, I logged in, Ticketmaster. I even just picked to get 1 ticket. I'm like, I will go see them by myself. Like, I've never seen them live. I want to see this. I want to be on the floor. I don't want to be seats. I want the experience, And I logged in. I got through. Some people might hate me for this. I got a ticket. A ticket popped up. I could have bought one and went. But it was so expensive. I forgot how much it was. And I was like, and I was just like, I can't kind of justify this. Like, it's during the week. I'm going to be spending all this money. Plus, I have to drive to Toronto. You're doing the adult thing.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, fuck, if they announce another tour, I'm going 100%. Just because after this lockdown and like the fear of like losing concerts, and having a concert back and being able to see a band like Rage Against the Machine live, fuck, I will pay $500.
That would be a good first concert post-lockdown or post-pandemic.
That would be great, yeah. I mean, it would be most likely to get reinfected at, but whatever. It's quite a sweaty crowd.
If it's like 2022, we're all vaccinated, I'm not worried.
Good. It's never going to be a second coronavirus.
I would risk COVID to see Rage.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Do it.
Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me.
Yeah.
All right,
well, before we move on, I just want to get back to
I was going to ask you, Ryan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I don't know what you're going to ask me, but I just what you're saying, Anise, about their albums, like there wasn't like a huge amount of evolution musically between these three albums. So a fourth album original, just hear me out here. It's not nothing drastic. It's not like, a reinvention of the wheel. It's like, oh, they're trying something new this time. They're just doing the same sort of thing, but maybe like some cooler grooves. There's no new elements. So what do you want? Like another album of the same thing? Obviously, you're not going to. You don't want them to evolve into something new and weird because they are special for what they are. And
yeah. We'll get into it more in a bit, but yeah, there is a progression in the three albums, but yeah.
There is a bit. I'm not going to say they're exactly the same, but...
Sorry, Gordon?
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate to Ryan's question. I mean, you take a band like Death From Above, they were, like a bunch of years in between, and then they came back, and they still sound relevant today compared to that album that we... You're a Woman, I'm a Machine.
Yeah.
Like, even though there's a big layover, it's not as big as 20 years, but they can do it, so...
And their sound is comparable to Rage.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm not telling Rage. Elements. I doubt they'll ever incorporate a synthesizer into their act, but it can be done.
Yes, that would be the next album, Rage on synths. Yeah.
The question I was going to ask you, Ryan, was what was your first experience with Evil Empire specifically?
Well, like Bulls on Parade, obviously, it was played on Edge all the time. That and Killing in the Name of, but like. I think it was probably Napster because it was around the same time because I had Battle of Los Angeles and then I would download the rest, whatever bits of the catalog I could get. It would take like 20 minutes or whatever. But then I would download little bits of Evil Empire. But I didn't get the whole thing through Napster. I eventually had to buy the album just at the record store at the mall, same place where I got Battle of Los Angeles, Fairview Mall.
It was So you didn't listen to Evil Empire until like 3 years after the release then?
No.
Outside of the singles?
Yeah, outside of the singles. I had heard most of it from I think it's just like a couple of the lesser known tracks later on in the album.
Yeah.
I don't remember knowing the last track. I probably had like half the album.
Okay. Yeah. How about you? What was yours, Gordon? What was your first experience?
So for me, since I don't actually own any Rage Against the Machine albums, so for me it was the
how did you get Battle of Los Angeles?
The singles. Well, the singles. There's tons of singles from that album. The radio, they're very radio friendly, and then of course Anise's music dump on his music dump onto my iPod. So that's how I was able to hear kind of those albums from beginning to end. So I came into it like in totality much later on. So my ranking of their albums is different than what your guys probably would be because you guys were on board with them as they were coming out, like buying the albums and stuff like that.
Well, I'm more on your page with that, Gordon, because I didn't get Evil Empire till later. Actually, I probably heard it first on your Discman at school in East when I think about it. Like the full thing. But there's so many singles, and popular singles that. What is there, 5 singles off of Evil Empire or 4 or 5?
I think there's 5 technically.
I know, but honestly, I feel like with Evil Empire, it was just Bulls on Parade. I just remember hearing Bulls on Parade.
That song's massive, yeah.
I just remember hearing that song being the only song I heard from them for at least on the radio or on Much Music for a solid 3 years or I guess No Shelter was in between there when Godzilla came out. But pretty much until Guerrilla Radio was Bulls on Parade being played on the radio, other than that brief summer where they played No Shelter before Godzilla was released. But it seemed I don't remember, even People of the Sun was a single, and I don't remember ever hearing that on the radio at the time.
I think it did make them more accessible, on Napster and stuff, though. Or maybe it didn't. I don't know. But it certainly those were the easier ones to download, because I remember knowing all the singles before I got the full album. And I don't think it was the radio because you're right. All they would ever play is "Killing in the Name of" or "Bulls on Parade" or "No Shelter." There,
I did know other songs. Of course, "No Shelter." I had the Godzilla soundtrack. That was a great song. I knew of that, but I couldn't tell you which songs were from which albums because I wasn't that hardcore like a Rage Against the Machine fan. Simply like I couldn't tell you if like Killing in the Name was on this album or if it was on their self-titled. If like Wake Up was on the first one or this one. I just knew kind of what was on Guerrilla Radio because that has more of a distinct sound, like that Tom Morello, what he's kind of known for now. When you think of like
Battle of LA,
was that
You mean Battle of Los Angeles album?
Yeah. So yeah, that one sounds kind of like when you think Rage Against the Machine, that has a very distinct sound to it. So I know what's on that.
It's interesting that you say that. What makes Battle of Los Angeles their distinct sound?
I was actually gonna. I'll take a stab at this for you, Gordon. Not to speak for you, but I was gonna say this with the whole idea of like what Ryan said, how they didn't really progress much. I would say I would challenge that a little bit because on the self-titled album, it was very riff heavy. Everything was riff heavy. Like there was barely of the little, like a lot of the little flares and techniques that Tom Morello does was kind of splattered here and there. It wasn't on every track. Whereas I feel like with Evil Empire, it was more of the techniques and flares that Tom Morello would use, especially for a lot of the verses. And it wasn't until the choruses, a lot of the times, or bridges or breakdowns that they would do in songs where you would actually hear the riff rock that they were more known for from the first album. Whereas I feel when you get to Battle of Los Angeles, speaking to Gordon's point, it's a culmination of both of that. Whereas a lot of the songs are built on riffs, like a lot of the things you think of when you think of like Sleep Now in the Fire is like the da-na-na-na-na-na, like
that's the one I was thinking of too.
But what do you also think of when you think of Sleep Now on the Fire?
Yeah.
All the little flares. So I feel like that was the culmination of the two albums. I could be way off. To me, it seemed like that was the way they went. Whereas Evil Empire, going back and looking at it now, you're like, there's barely any riffs, but the riffs that are on here are so good and memorable. But it's not like that first album where all those songs were just these amazing riffs, like one after another.
Yeah. So like looking back on it, since like that's what I've been doing, I've just been listening to Rage all week. If you take the first album and you compare it to the third album, there's a difference. But if you if you just remove Evil Empire,
that's a good point.
So Evil Empire, I feel, is like a transition between those albums. It's a transition album, I think, between those two.
The trajectory.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as saying that Evil Empire is, has less riffs. I mean, maybe I should listen a little closer, but I can't think of a single song that isn't kind of like there's riffs all over the album there. But
yes, I agree. There is, but it's not. But a lot of the verses are built on just these little guitar noises and
maybe it's just frequency.
Yeah. Whereas that first album didn't really have any of that, like very little of it, and it was more splattered here and there.
So do you think it's Tom Morello just getting more experimental and more technical, or like more produced almost as the albums progress?
It's not really produced. I think it was just sort of refining, because on this album you had a lot more of that. Because some of the songs on here, we'll get into some of the songs, but they are were a lot bouncier. We're a lot more hip hop and feel. I found, as opposed to the stuff that was on the self-titled. The self-titled, I would say, was more of just like almost like a straight up hardcore album compared to this thing, where Evil Empire, you had your heavier elements of hip hop, which led to those. My guitar is now a turntables. Right. My soul's going to sound like scratching. I'm just going to make these little noises of feedback or high pitched whatever for this song, and the riffs were only kicking in for the choruses and when they wanted to punch it up.
Right. So there's more. So would you say there's more hip hop than like a progression towards more of those stylistic choices and grooves and stuff as they go through the three albums, or is it not that clear?
I didn't listen to Battle of LA as closely this week as I did this, but this album seemed like when a lot of the funkiness was really on display.
Yeah, that's when they hit the recipe, I think.
Yeah, because a lot of these songs pretty much function like a hip hop song with guitars.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get into Battle of LA, they're kind of going back to the more hardcore riff rock.
Interesting. Okay, so I always thought that wasn't the case. I always thought that, Battle of Los Angeles is also really groovy with a lot of hip hop.
It has that as well. Like, don't get me wrong, but that's what I think that goes to Gordon's point of the culmination of everything.
Yeah, because I would say the third album definitely leads more into like the groovy, the funkiness. I wouldn't call the first album groovy at all or like funky. Like, I mean, there's elements there, but like not like the second two albums.
But they didn't bring back those hardcore elements. Like they didn't turn back to lean on.
They never really left.
Yeah.
Like I would say like Wake Up is probably harder than anything on like Battle of LA. Like it just kind of feels that seems like such a heavy song.
That scream, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Enemy, just that like that's where you get that leg bouncing.
Yeah.
I was known for, but yeah.
So I guess we can get more into the song questions. So the biggest song, I think we all agree, from Evil Empire is Bulls on Parade.
Yeah.
Parade.
Okay, cool. Sure. What's your favorite song off Evil Empire, Ryan?
Vietnam, hands down. Those drums, man. And it's probably the grooviest, like the hip hoppiest. So it's got that, and yeah, it's full of it. The hooks are great too. I love that song. Yeah,
I like the just the random guitar sounds in it, especially the way it ends. Yeah.
So it's so weird sound. Like I don't even know how he. No. I tried to teach some of my drum students the part, so I have to like play it on guitar. I'm like, oh crap, how do I fake Tom Morello? It was like, there's no way. I need like a pedal board.
I love like how muddy the guitar sounds too. Like it's like using the neck pickup. It's just so like.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. Like the verses in that song are more open, but when the chorus comes, you get like more of the riffy guitar stuff. So now, like thinking of it in context, yeah.
Now,
just listening to the album this morning, I could just picture if I was listening to this like when it came out, I could just see myself thrashing around my bedroom, just being like, "Shut that devil sound," or "Shut down that devil sound."
Oh
just,
yeah,
like,
that's
into the chorus.
That's such a great chorus hook too. Like it could mean, it's like that vagary of rage. It could mean anything almost to like you. If you're pissed off about something, you could, insert anger object here. You know
exactly.
what I mean?
Like, how about you, Anise? What's your favorite off this one?
It's hard to pick anything outside of Bulls on Parade, but speaking outside of Bulls on Parade, which is like iconic at this point, Vietnam I'm a fan of as well, but I like Revolver.
Oh yeah,
just like how aggressive Revolver is.
Yeah.
No, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just like how like it's almost like the song like has this build and it just sort of like starts over and repeats.
Yeah.
But then it has like that sort of bigger ending with when everything kind of kicks back in, the guitar rips, everything kicks. I just love the energy of that track.
It's got that double time feel.
You can pick a lot of these songs, but yeah, I don't know. Today that felt like that song hit right.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was listening to that song, his screaming came to mind. So I know we've talked about great screamers in the past, like Chino from Deftones and stuff like that. But Zach, his voice, his scream, like is one of the great rock screams.
For sure, yeah. And he doesn't have to worry about singing, so he can fuck his voice up all he wants.
I know the guy, he raps and he screams. Like, that's a pretty cool combination.
I know, I love it in Wind. I'd say where his screaming shines is in The Wind Below, at the end of that, where the guitar is almost screaming and then he starts screaming and it's almost like muffling because everything is so loud.
Or the right before the guitar solo in, I think it's Guerrilla Radio. Yeah. Or is that Sleeping on the Fire? Am I mixing? Both of those have awesome guitar solos. So wrong album.
So I guess my favorite track is definitely Bulls on Parade.
Really?
Yeah, it's so good. Like just
you like
everything.
The singles, man.
When the single's the best song, it's
I don't know. It's kind of overplayed. Sorry, getting ahead here.
But
I think we have to establish a new rule that if it's the biggest song, we can't pick it as our favorite.
Okay, you want me to? Okay, my second.
What if you
favorite?
like it that much, though? That's not fair.
But okay,
a lot of times it's hard to like disassociate that song with just how grandiose and big it is, and like narrow it down like that. It's big, so much bigger than the album.
So, Gordon, when you listen to this album, like, are you like, all right, I can't wait for Bulls on Parade? Like, is that the one that you really want to hear?
No, the rest of it's good. It's just that there's something very, maybe it's because I've heard it so much, but when that song comes on, I'm amped. Like, let's go. Like, right, that opening riff, it's like, like
it's
everything about
infectious.
It. Like, I mean,
a lot of, their album opens great too. If you want to get in, like, if you want to mention album openings,
that's another great song. Yeah.
Just before we get into it, do you want to just get Bulls on Parade out of the way? Like, do you guys have any other thoughts about it? And then we can just move on from talking about that song.
I'll say that guitar. The guitar is just iconic. That wow, like that. Just everything about the song is great. I love how, like, in the verses, when it kind of has like a sinister sound to it. The whole like
that bass line's great. I love that.
I feel like there's a lot of points on this album where a lot of times I feel like the bass lines were speaking to me in a weird way. I'm like, I feel like it's trying to tell me something.
I remember in high school, like my high school band trying to cover Bulls on Parade. You cannot do this. You need a Zach in the band, or else it sounds disgusting. Like, it's just like, what are you guys trying to do? There
is actually a great cover of this by Denzel Curry.
I heard that this week, and I didn't know who Denzel Curry was before this, but I thought the cover was amazing.
Oh yeah,
Denzel Curry is a great rapper. I recommend his one album.
Check that out.
I can't think of the name right now, but a lot of his stuff, he can get very aggressive, where you can hear elements of like rage influence on it. So it was actually really interesting hearing him cover it. And I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to what Ryan was saying, like how if you're not Zach, you're kind of missing it. Somehow Denzel Curry just makes the song angrier, if you can imagine that. Like, when he starts screaming, you're like, oh my god, he takes it up a level from what even Zach does on the album.
Yeah, in order to play those songs, you need a really committed like frontman. It can't be like just the singer in your regular band. You gotta play that character in order to pull off the song.
I feel a lot of their songs, it's almost like everyone has to be very, because their music is just full with so much like energy because of like their message that they're trying to get across. That just being a band, just being so energetic, like that Tom Morello. Leg is always bouncing, and it's always just, and they're all just so in it at all times, and it's just part of the band. Like, it's part of their sound, that energy.
Yeah, they have really good time feel too, so that really helps that bounciness and that energy, because it's so easy to sink into. It's so easy to dance along with. I'm pretty sure in high school my band was not that good with the time feel, so no Zach, no time feel, sucked.
And then one other piece of trivia that I came across with this song. Apparently, the song is the band's response to the U.S. building a southern border wall to Mexico.
Are you shitting me?
Yeah, no. So this guy, I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But so they were talking about this stuff 25 years before, or 20 years before, like, it was a catchphrase or anything like that.
That's it's almost like, I was going to say it's funny, but it's actually pretty sad. Like, this week I was listening to like a lot of Rage, and I also was listening to a lot of Tool for whatever reason, but I found like a lot of the messaging in their music, a lot of it still applies today because nothing has really changed. So it's kind of sad, but I guess that's the world. 3 steps forward, 1 step back, or what do they say? 2 steps back.
I don't know. Though they could probably release another album, do quite well. Same theme.
So I mean, if going back to the original question, what's favorite song? If I can't pick that song, I'd probably go Down Rodeo. I think that's a great.
I really like Down Rodeo.
Yeah.
Which I found odd when I was because I was like jumping ahead here maybe to our most underrated, but I was looking at I was like, how am I going to judge this? Because it seems like this anything Rage is everyone loves, right? So I was looking at the streams on YouTube, and Down Radio in Vietnam had the least amount of streams on their like official video on the Rage page. Yeah, and it was like a lot lower. I'm like, did they have to re-upload these videos for whatever reason, or are people just sleeping on these songs? Because those are two of my favorites.
Yeah,
I feel like
when I went to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe there's a different video people are streaming that has a song on it that's just been around longer. You know how these things are on YouTube. It's hard to know what people are listening to, but yeah, that being my only barometer, I thought that was strange because those are two of my favorite tracks, and both of you have mentioned them as well. That I found it odd. Yeah. They have lesser streams.
So yeah, I checked their what is it, Setlist FM, just to see what songs they play from this album, and they play "People of the Sun" and obviously "Bulls on Parade," and then every once in a while they'll throw in "Down Radio." It's not at every show, but it's like every third or fourth show. So I think they like playing it too.
Okay.
Yeah, but like it is kind of an underrated song.
That first chord at the beginning, it reminds me of Japandroids. Very few people are going to get this, but it sounds like a Japandroids chord. Anyway, thought I'd point that out. It's it's like probably the only chord on the album.
That song has some of the bounciness that I was talking about that you would see later on in bands like Korn and some of the new metal stuff that happened.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know, that's a great track. I love like the phasey guitar sounds in the verse.
Yeah,
it's something like he's known for his old different sounds, but you don't really get much phasiness from Tom.
Certainly, I don't think on the first album, like that's a new introduction. Is it not? I don't remember him using.
I don't know. I didn't really listen that close. I didn't really listen to the first album that closely, but yeah, maybe.
Could be.
I know that great song it also has like the whole scratching, emulating the DJ turntable for the solo, but it's a different sound than Bulls. It's not like he's doing the same technique over again and mimicking the same turntable sound again. He's mimicking different turntable techniques and just applying them to his.
He's making them unique. Enough.
Yeah, great.
So I guess we can take this time right now. That seems like a good segue. Just a random question. Do you guys want to spend like a minute just talking about like Tom Morello, like your thoughts on him? Because he seems to be like one of those quintessential 90s guitarists. He's got a very distinct sound. How do you guys feel about him?
Yeah, he's listed as like one of the greatest guitar players ever. Is crazy, but I don't think I've ever seen him shred or like technically play really great. I mean, he is really great. And time feel and all that is really creativeness.
So what is he good at then?
On the first album.
Does he like really shred? I mean, in terms of like the best guitar players in the world, because he's considered up there.
But best is like I know for someone like me, like I know I joke all the time on here that I'm not the greatest guitar player, but I did a lot of the techniques he would do. Like listening back to Evil Empire and some of the stuff that he was doing, I'm like, oh, I was trying to mimic him more than I was trying to mimic some of like your more traditional guitar virtuosos, like some
whale noises.
What? Whale noises. But yeah, no, I found like for me personally as a guitar player, like I looked up to him just because he found almost like a different use for the guitar as opposed to just like ripping out these riffs.
Yeah.
Which he still did. Like it's not like he didn't do that as well, but he also was able to create a whole different way of using the guitar and was mimicking like scratching or synthesizers or samples and just doing different things, and it just sounds great. Like even just something like on the song Wind Below, like I thought that song, like in that solo there, it sounds like an old like radio murder mystery. Like the musical score from like an old murder mystery, and I'm like he's making this sound from his guitar, like just playing. He's not like he's doing anything technically crazy, but he's using his pedals, his just whatever he's doing to the guitar, and it's just creating these different sounds. It almost sounds like it's a sample, but it's not. He's doing it, and it almost sounds like it's turntables, but it's not. It's him doing it. So it's a different way of looking at a guitar player. So yes, this guy can play scales really fast, or you can be like, this guy is turning his guitar into a whole different instrument.
Yeah, and it's very, very musical still. Like it's not like he's like, oh, I can just make noises and that'll make me unique. It's still the elements of a great solo, even though he's just like scratching on the side of the string or whatever the hell he's doing. Yeah. But you can still feel like a build to it and an end. Whereas I could see if a lazier guitar player would be like, I'm just going to make some sound, and it's just some sound.
This all doesn't work without a strong bass player and drummer. Because they like carry, like they're, especially on this album, because a lot of the verses are pretty much
bass and drums
on bass lines, and he's just sort of adding these flares. So it's kind of cool to hear. I don't know. For me, as someone who wasn't technically great, I was trying to mimic people like him, looking up to people like him, as opposed to looking up to your typical, I don't know.
Carlos Santana.
And it goes against their
Carlos Santana's Jimi Hendrix.
Yes. It goes against their whole vibe, their whole the punk anti-establishment vibe to not play a normal solo. It's like, no, screw it. I'm gonna do something different.
Yeah, but at the same time, I found especially in the last two tracks that I found it kind of got away from them at some points. Just some of the noise, but
that's why you put them at the end of the album.
Right?
That's why you put them at the end.
I think Year the Boomerang was released on a soundtrack, like the soundtrack for Higher Learning, like a year or two before this album came out. So I think it was just kind of tacked on at the end.
Right, that would make sense.
So yeah, I mean, no, that sheds some light. Like for me, I'm not a guitar player, so I mean, I just know his distinct sound. So I'm like, it's good to when you guys kind of answered my question of like, where does his skill lie? Is it more on technically, or is he just good at making like unique noises and sounds like that?
Yeah,
he carried it forward to Audio Slave as well, where it's more like he still had the riffs that he was, the great riffs that you heard on like the first album, and what he's kind of known for as well, along with those little flares he used more for solos and whatnot.
Yeah, those riffs are definitely an important part of it. Although I will say with Audio Slave, it didn't work so well because he tried to do too much of the traditional kind of thing, like write chord progressions. And I get it. You had a singer now, but it just didn't feel right having these typical chord progressions. And then he'd go to a cool riff and then maybe a cool solo or something, and then back to like a crappy chord progression. So
yeah, I know what you mean. Like there was Audio Slave, there's cool elements to Audio Slave, and there's songs I like by Audio Slave, but I was never really that huge into Audio Slave. And you can kind of say maybe that was the trajectory. Maybe Rage was going to start writing songs like that. Maybe that was I don't know.
I mean, I agree with both of you about Audio Slave, like 100%. But at the same time, it did give us Cochise, and that song is amazing.
That is good. And why is that good? Because he stuck to the riffs. There's no chord progression in that song. It's just Rage riffs. So they got it right with that. But then I remember hearing him speak in an interview about this. Like he was all like, yeah, it's a new thing, Audio Slave. I got to write chord progressions now for the singer and stuff. He literally said that. And so I was just thinking oh, I see. You're trying to do something and because you have to, not because it was the inspiration is oh, we got a singer now, so we have to do it. But you didn't have to do it. They didn't have to with Cochise, but yeah.
Well, you could have done what a lot of the stuff they did on here and let the bass take over those moments. But
I don't know. I don't know.
But on the flip side, I will say I did see another band he was part of, Street Sweeper Social Club, when they opened on the Nine Inch Nails Jane's Addiction tour.
Yeah.
And my only complaint with that band was that it was all gimmick. Like by gimmick, I mean just those little guitar tricks.
The extra stuff,
yeah. The point where it was okay, he's not really doing anything new because it's little tricks that he did on Rage songs, stuff he did on Audio Slave songs, but now he's doing it on these other songs, and every song had a little thing that he would do. So I was just sort of man, this isn't bad, but it's sort of
too much.
It became gimmicky, so.
Is he the only?
Remember this? Remember I can do this?
Was he the only guitar player in that band?
I can't even remember. Probably there was
because that would also there's nothing to distract if that's all that you're getting. There's no balance, I guess.
What about his solo stuff? Have you guys heard any of Tom Morello's solo stuff?
The Night Watchman.
Yeah. It's
more singer-songwriter stuff. It's more singer-songwriter stuff. I've never listened to too much of it. No, I'm not very familiar.
No, I've only listened to a bit, and I was just what's special about? I guess you're Tom Morello, so you have a fan base already.
That clout.
It brings up that whole question of you go to a certain band for a certain type of music, and when they change, should you be mad or happy that they're changing or doing something different? But they might change into something that you already follow artists that make that type of music. It raises so many questions.
I'm sure there's other people who love it. So
yeah. I just never listened to it. Maybe for diehard Tom Morello fans. It's like
I think I remember feeling this, like, oh, Tom Morello's doing this sort of thing, but there's other artists I like who do this sort of thing a lot better.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess
I do like when Tom Morello pops up in movies.
Yes, yeah.
Like in Swingers and not Swingers, Made, and he was in one other one, but it's like, yeah, great.
I know that guy.
Get more.
All right, so I guess we can move back his acting career. So I guess you can move back into the song questions from Evil Empire. Do we all agree that Bulls on Parade is the most overplayed?
I would say,
if we had to pick one,
there's so many other songs.
To me, it's not played enough. But
no, because you have to realize, like at the time, like when this album came out, like I said, they had all these singles, but I was almost shocked that they had all these singles. Like I knew People of the Sun was a single, but I just remember like the radio just latching on to Bulls on Parade, playing it for like 2 years straight. Then No Shelter for that summer where Godzilla came out, and then it just was back to Bulls on Parade until Guerrilla Radio came out. At the time I don't really remember hearing any of these singles that they have listed here. I was actually shocked. Like Year of the Boomerang and Down Rodeo and Vietnam. These were all singles? Like I was shocked.
I think the other reason for that is too, like along the way, these guys pretty much always have pushback. Like I know, yes, they're popular. They have a radio presence on even today. But like when they were touring this album, there were so many people that wanted to cancel their shows. The police were interfering, being like, "You're promoting like what we disagree with. Like we're not with what you guys want to do." And all along the way, they've always had to be like 100% legit. Like make sure they got all their permits, make sure everybody's on the same page. Their tours are good in order for them to even work.
Yeah, because people are ready to knock them down.
On every level.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
So, Anis, you might have answered this one already, but what do you think is the most underrated track on this album?
Well, I was going back to those Down Rodeo and Vietnam, how they were played less in the stream. But I guess, do they have music videos? Maybe that was the reason why they had less streams. Because I didn't even realize they were singles. So if they had music videos, maybe that was always taking some of those streams.
Maybe.
Because even in the playlist, they had like People of the Sun and Bulls on Parade. It had their music videos. I'm just going by the Rage Against the Machine official page.
Yeah.
And the rest were just like videos with the album cover. And those two had the least amount. So I'm like, people are missing out on those. Like, especially they're two songs that we collectively picked out as songs we liked from the album. It's just strange that they're not only they released as singles, but they're listened to less. I don't know. Maybe we're off, but
I can see how the radio wouldn't want to play a song that tells you to turn the radio off a lot. So that might have had something to do with it. What
did you guys have any other songs that you thought were a little overlooked that we haven't talked about?
I like Tire Me. I really like the part where the music cuts out and he does the Jackie Onassis part. That part's pretty cool, where it's just him singing it. That was for me the one I had underrated, and I guess Down Rodeo but then when I saw it was played at concerts, I'm like, is it? I don't know. How do you guys feel about it?
I know for Tire Me, that had like the most like the intro, like that, just the sound of that bass reminded me of like a Jesus Lizard sort of Nirvana, that sort of Steve Albini produced vibe.
Yeah,
kind of fit in with the grunge music that was happening at the time, at least the sound of that.
Yeah, that's not a funky song.
No. And then I love that's one of the only points where Tom is, doing his guitar solo thing, but it's overshadowed by the drumming.
Yeah.
There's some great drumming over that solo part there. It's a great song.
How about you, Ryan? Do you have an underrated track?
I do remember hearing People of the Sun on the radio, but not very much. Like I think maybe later on they would throw it down a few times, but I feel like that could have been done a lot better. Like
it was it was their second single, I would say, like in the slew, like it was Bulls on Parade, and then this would have been the second. You're the Boomerang, we can't really count because it's on
if that was reverse order,
yeah,
that might have been People of the Sun probably would have done a lot better. But once Bulls on Parade was already out of the gates, it's like, how do you top that? So they were kind of screwed at that point.
Yeah, I just feel like the songs on here, I feel like Evil Empire is more known for like being a great album as opposed to songs, because when you think of the first album, you think of, like Know Your Enemy, Freedom, Bomb Track, like you think of specific songs like Wake Up, Playing in the Name of. Whereas when you think of Evil Empire, there's Bulls on Parade, but you more so think of Evil Empire, won the Grammy, was sort of like came out in the middle of the 90s, in the middle of everything. And, and then when the other album came out, it was the whole playing at the inauguration and all that crap was going on. But as far as the album goes, it was the singles, like Testify, Sleep Down the Fire, Guerrilla Radio. There's so many individual songs you pick out, right? I feel like on Evil Empire, it's Bulls on Parade. And then for some people, it's People of the Sun, and then the rest. It just seems like it's more known for the album.
Yeah, I don't think of, even though People of the Sun was on the radio occasionally, I still see it as like a one single album. Like, I still clump People of the Sun with the rest of the album. There's Bulls on Parade, and there's everything else that you didn't hear as much. So they just, yeah.
I'm definitely in that boat. Before, like, I knew more about Rage. I mean, I thought the only single, if I were to see the track list on this album, the only song that I'd probably be able to point out is Bulls on Parade. As opposed to the other two, I can tell you 3 or 4 off of each album.
Yeah.
It just feels like those were just more like the specific songs were picked out of those albums, maybe. I don't know.
But how many official singles did they actually have, though? They still had like 4 or 5 off of this thing, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. They were like, those were the singles like that I listed off. Like Bulls on Parade.
Okay, yeah.
People of the Sun, Down Rodeo, and Vietnam.
It's a weird combo.
Yeah.
So let me throw this out there. Is there a song that you guys skip if you're listening to this album? Anise?
For me, it's kind of what I mentioned earlier about the messiness of those the last 2 tracks. It's not that I dislike them. There's moments in the songs that I like, but like I know for Roll Right, like when that guitar riff opens off, it's a cool, kind of a cool guitar riff, and then the bass line rolls in, and the bass line's even cooler, has again that sinister, darker sound. But I feel like when the chorus hits, it doesn't really mesh all together for me the greatest. Like the verse sounds really cool, and the verse sounds really cool with that bass line, but I just feel like that other guitar riff when it hits in the chorus doesn't really mesh. And then even at the ending, when like everything is supposed to like come to a head and you have that energy going to the end, I feel like it lacks some of the energy that the other songs have, and I think it's partially due to the bass line and the guitar riff sort of counteracting each other. Yeah. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like for Roll Right, that's my only real issue. But the verse is good enough that I don't really skip it. But if I had to pick, and then Year of the Boomerang, again, that's another one where it's another bouncy track, but I feel like the pre-chorus is very messy and the ending gets very sort of, the ending isn't bad, but I just feel like it wasn't didn't really gel well as some of the other songs. Their songs are more like, the energy right in your face. So when anything sort of is off and a little bit messy or doesn't really work, I feel like it just sort of throws the song off and the energy off, and it just doesn't really work for me.
Yeah.
So I'd say the last 2 tracks, like if I had to stop the album early, it wouldn't be the end of the world for me.
You wouldn't feel bad, yeah.
Yeah, but there are still good elements to them. But yeah, if I had to pick a song or 2, it'd probably be those last 2. But still a solid album through and through.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying like we skip these songs. I'm just saying if you had to pick one.
Yeah. I like to criticize a couple of the tracks.
How about you, Ryan? You got one?
Well, out of this is to answer your question like as accurately as possible. I skip Bulls on Parade. Like I've just heard the damn song so much, and that doesn't mean I don't like it, and it doesn't mean I don't put it on. But usually, I'll put it on as a separate thing. It's like, let's listen to Bulls on Parade. I want to play this guitar riff, but then I'm not listening to the album. If I'm listening to the album, I'm usually like, I just want to get to Vietnam a little faster.
So you're going from track 1 to 3.
Pretty much, yeah. I just skip Bulls on Parade. I don't know. It's just I've heard it so much that it's become something outside of what the album is in my mind, anyway.
It kind of goes to like what I was saying when we're talking about Arctic Monkeys' debut album, how with I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor being the second track, and sometimes just wanting to listen to that track, you listen to it and listen to the rest of the album through.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, this is almost the same thing, but with the first 2. Because People of the Sun is a great opener, just the way how everything kind of kicks in. It's a great opener to the album. And then that song is done, and then it hits you with Bulls on Parade. And at that point, like for me at least, I'm just committed to listen to the rest of the album through.
Yeah. I I don't know. I skip Bulls on Parade. People of the Sun, I hear it. Usually I'm not in the mood for Rage, but then I put People of the Sun on. I'm like, oh, man. And then I start going, and then I'm like, okay, Bulls on Parade. I've heard that a bunch. Skip, and then I get to the rest of it. That's the thought process.
For me, my answer is kind of, my reasoning's shitty because I'm using hindsight. But basically, for me, it's Without a Face. To me, it sounds like a watered down version or a watered down song from Battle of Los Angeles. So I'm using hindsight to look at that. And that's if I had to pick a song, of course. I just felt like it had some of the funk elements that you'd hear later on, but it just wasn't. I don't know, it doesn't really fit with the rest. I mean, it fits, but it's not like, I want more of it, so I'll go to Battle of Los Angeles.
I see, it's like the slow jam kind of hip hop thing from Battle of Los Angeles. Is that what you're?
Yeah, like I see where they're going to go in the future, and the seeds are there. But I'm like, if I want more of that, I'm just going to go to that album for it.
Right.
I like Without a Face is probably one of my favorites on the album. I
love that song.
I know. I like the vibe it sets right away. It gets my head bouncing like the instant that the song starts.
Yeah.
And then I like how everything sort of breathes in the chorus before he says like "born without a face," like pause for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even the solo, it just sort of sounds choppy and spacey and noisy all together. It's, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good example of that, like just like the cool, weird guitar stuff, but then the bass and the drums are carrying it.
Yeah, but I can see in hindsight, if you're listening to it like in reverse order, how it might sound a little redundant of some of the latter stuff. But at the time, it was like a good blend.
Oh yeah, for sure. I would probably have a completely different opinion if I bought the album like in '96 when it came out and I was listening to it. I would probably think differently of it, but since I'm going back with like the full context of their discography, that's how I look at it.
And that's how you got it. That's the order you got. You already had that off of Battle.
So this album has pretty unique artwork. Well, it'll be easy for us to rip for our logo and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to that one. But basically, where this album comes from is it's a rip from a comic book strip from a guy named Mel Ramos from the 40s and 50s. So it's from this Crime Buster series that he had back then, and it's the same image, but they took C. It's a lowercase c, and they replaced it with a lowercase e. I'm sure that stands for evil. So it's a pretty cool album cover, even if you don't get the reference. How do you guys feel about the artwork? Because I don't own the album, so you guys might be able to shed more light on the liner notes.
I had no idea what it meant when I got the E meant evil, but I had no idea until now what the backstory was. It was just like, oh, that's a weird. I put no extra thought into the album cover.
Yeah, for me, I thought it was a cool album cover. Being like a comic book kid, seeing a kid with a cape on the cover was kind of cool, but I didn't really think of. I figured it was something political. Like I knew there were political bands, so
yeah,
it had some sort of deeper meaning. But again, like I said earlier, for me, it was just great music. I didn't really put too much thought into that stuff, especially as like an 11-year-old kid, you know.
Yeah, a little bit too young to understand whatever deeper meaning might be behind the cover.
Or like when you see their set on their stage and it's like, hey, what's that black flag with the red star? It's like you look into it and it's like some Mexican liberation army, socialist liberation army.
I do remember because like a lot of the logos, like their fist and they're just their name being spelled out and stuff was on
Che Guevara.
Yeah, it was on a lot of clothing back in the day. Like a lot of people would just wear Rage shirts and hats and hoodies and stuff. And I remember meeting just in junior high when this album came out. And I remember that's how seeing our one friend Casey in the hallways wearing a Rage Against the Machine shirt is like, that guy's probably cool. Like I don't know him, but he's probably cool. He's wearing a Rage. But again, it goes back to like,
that guy's probably burning down police stations or something.
but that just goes back to at the time, like how music was such a part of like who you were. It sort of was like, oh, that guy listens to Rage, so he's cool.
Yeah.
Their artwork was all part of that image, I guess, of being into this type of music.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I remember I knew that album cover was a Rage album cover. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew like whenever I saw that picture, I'm like, oh, that's Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
So did you guys have any final thoughts on the album before I guess we move to some bigger questions about Rage. Any tracks or songs that we missed that you guys wanted to talk about?
What did we cover? Yeah.
I think we covered a lot of pretty much. Do you have any thoughts on Snake Charmer? I didn't have any notes for that one.
I always thought that song, like, again, in hindsight, you can hear like some Muse in there, just in like just how like it's, again, bouncy and sounds like it could be like in a chase scene in a movie or something, just the pace of the song. I don't know, just a little more up tempo. Yeah, maybe because we just did Muse like not too long ago, it just kind of gave me a Muse-ish vibe.
Oh, actually, yeah. Dun, dun, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, I'm thinking that's like a bass line from
one of their songs.
Origins of Symmetry. Yeah, something off of that.
Yeah, it just has like a similar type of feel. Like again, but again, it just shows you like the sort of influence that Rage had on the mainstream and just music moving forward. But yeah, sure. That's another great track. So
I guess that takes us. How do you guys rank their discography, or where does this album rank in their discography? I mean, it's only I call it 3.5 albums they've released, because the other one's just like a cover album. So we won't even count that. Out of these 3 albums, how does this one rank for you guys, or does that hit too hard on the question?
You go first, Denise.
Rank. I think I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier, where I feel like with just the way the songs are built on their self-titled and on Battle of LA, there's a lot of really good songs on them. But when it comes to like as an album as a whole, I feel like this album is a lot more unique. There's a lot more of where you started seeing the pieces of what you think of when you think of Rage Against the Machine, when you think of like the wah-wah and like the DJ scratching solos and Tom Morello with his flares. It all sort of like, there was elements of it on the first album, but this is where it kind of took center stage. So this album does stand a little different to me, and it does hold together better as like a Rage album, as something new and something different and something, you know, that brought all their influences together, because I do know they come from like hip hop and metal and rock and folk and every type of music, and you kind of hear it all, I think, best in here. I feel like in this album kind of gels the best. So I would rank this one first for that reason, because I feel like as an album as a whole, it's the best. Then I would probably go to the self-titled, the first album. Just because, again, when you go to the individual tracks, where I feel like those albums are just individual tracks stand out. Songs like Know Your Enemy and Killing in the Name Of are some of my favorite Rage Against the Machine songs, and they're on that album. So it's hard to not rank that second. And then third, I'd say Battle of LA. It is a great album, but for me, it came at the end. I'd already had so much of just kind of getting, you know, so much of my early musical memories, you know, listening to Evil Empire, like 11 years old, because I had older cousins and siblings. I had more memories attached to those albums. So I remember when Battle of LA first came out, I didn't even really like it that much until later on. I kind of gained appreciation over it over time, whereas this album I liked right away. So for me, yeah, it'd be Evil Empire, self-titled, Battle.
Okay, interesting. My take on it is pretty similar, but I've flipped 2 of them around. Like, I think you're right about Evil Empire. It's like that's when they really hit the balance of these elements. And you could say that they kept the balance for the next album, but, you know, Battle of LA, it almost seemed like I swear at times there's maybe like 2 guitar tracks going on, and it's just like a little bit more refined, right? Yeah. Which is cool, but then it's not quite as raw as maybe the raw balance is a little off.
And this might sound bad, but like I would mix up some of the songs, like Sleep Now in the Fire, Testify. They're all sort of like,
they do have a lot of the same,
similar in feel, and like, not that they're bad songs. I love those songs, but these songs, I feel like they have more character, each individual song.
Yeah, but I also just like, I'm a sucker for the groove element of it, so I still put Battle of LA before the self-titled, just because it's got that grooviness and the guitar cool solos and all that shit, which is what I like. You know, Evil Empire is probably number 1, but then Battle of LA at least has some of those elements that they hit on. So that's number 2 for me. I mean, Renegade is number 1. What am I talking about?
No, it's funny because I have my rankings the opposite of you guys. I think the first one's the best one. I mean, it's got it's got their best songs on it. Like, I mean, Wake Up and Killing in the Name of, and all those songs are amazing. And then I think Battle of LA, just because that's when I really started to turn an ear to them, I guess. And then this one, I agree, it's a solid album. It's got if you're looking for it from purely a rock perspective or a 90s rock perspective, it's got a lot of those great elements in it. But in terms of just like how often I just listen to the albums or songs from the album, I gotta rank it third, just because I listen to songs from the other two albums more than I listen to songs from this album.
Fair enough.
And we all had different rankings. I think that's the first. Usually we're sort of
just,
on the same
just on our rankings. Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's probably good for the band, because that just means that everybody's got their own favorite.
And I'm not going to lie, like if I came into Rage like in the mid 90s as opposed to like the late 90s or early 2000s, I would probably have the same rankings that you guys have, or very similar ranking. So I guess the final question I can ask here before we get into the main question is, where does Rage stand in history, like in music for you, or like do you see them as music? I know we talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but
I see them as music.
You see them as purely music, or anything like you don't look at everything else that encompasses them, or like how do you look at that?
I think that their musical impact was far greater than their political impact. So I would say that you should judge them first as a musical act, for sure. And also they can be faulted for spurring on new metal, so maybe that too. But I don't know, like they brought this like rawness element to radio, which you know, there's no singer in the band, so that's good. They widened the scope of mainstream a little bit there, but they didn't have a slew of copycat bands, so I don't. They're kind of a standalone, you know. They're still here, but once they're gone, I don't know if they're going to have a lasting legacy. To be honest, I'm not sure.
How do you feel?
That's kind of a depressing thought.
I know. Well, it just occurred to me. You need those copycat bands.
I'll kind of. Can I answer both the place in history and the essential question in one?
Sure. I'll go first then, I guess, with the place in history thing. And then I'll let you take it away. So yeah, I guess the place in history, I think we got it. I look at them as everything, because when I first heard of Rage, or like was getting into them, I think of like Michael Moore's Locking Down the Stock Exchange. So I think of them as more than music. And I think they also work off of that too, because I mean, you can look at their music sales. They re-entered the Billboard Top 200. It seems like whenever there's some sort of cultural or like political strife, people want to hear Rage. Like they're ready for that moment. So I think as long as you have that going on, some issues in society that are coming out, like Black Lives Matter, or like cops killing people, things like that gets people going. And like hearing this music is a good soundtrack for that.
Yeah, their music will always endlessly be connected to any sort of social movement, whether it's something that aligns with their beliefs or not. People are
yeah, that's true too.
Because that's the whole thing. The Rage Against the Machine is sort of like a vague statement. Like, what machine? You can apply the name to anything.
The man, the machine.
That's true.
Yeah.
That does give it some like lasting power. But we'll see. We'll see if it's. I don't know. I don't know if the kids are still listening to Rage or not, or what.
I think.
Yeah.
I think Rage are. I'm pretty sure. Like, if I had to take a wild guess, I'd say that they're growing probably in fan base.
Yeah.
Because their music is so unique. Like you were saying, like they did change a lot of what was going on in music and did bring a lot of different things to the mainstream.
Yeah.
No one really did mimic them.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So like
they're still fresh.
So like their place in history for me is they came in 92, but really for me, I feel like this album in 96 was kind of more of they were part of the zeitgeist and were able to control it and turn it and to kind of help mold it for the future. So I feel like everything that came after them, obviously they influenced like the new metal stuff, they influenced the hardcore stuff, they influenced like the emo, screamo, rap rock. Like there was elements of that in their music. So I feel like they were the ones who brought it to the mainstream, where it kind of became like a viable type of music to be played on the radio, and it kind of got ran off with, like even like a band like Refuse that came out a little bit after that. Like I feel like A Shape of Punk to Come shares a lot and similar with Evil Empire, and that's like considered like a hardcore album and a classic genre defining album in itself, and it sounds similar to this. So I feel like this has so many spider webs out into different types of music that I feel like they're just an important band, and I feel like they are a band that they're inevitable to come across in history. And going to the political side too, it just made people more politically active. I remember it was like part of listening to them to like even know a little bit about what was going on.
Yeah.
It just was like part of the band. Like I remember being younger, getting into them. It was sort of like, do you even like the band? Like, what are their beliefs?
Yeah, right.
They're so radical.
It's not the radical thing at the time. So I would say for all these reasons, and like to answer the essential question, I would say the band is essential. Like, I don't know if you can pick out one album by them, and it was like such a snapshot. I feel like Rage Against the Machine is an essential band. Like I can sit here and tell you that Evil Empire is their best album and it's my favorite, and this album is essential, but Killing in the Name of is bigger than any of this. Like Killing in the Name of is just as big as the band, as like a protest song, as like it gets played like pretty much when they re-entered the charts. I'm guessing it was just people playing Killing in the Name of. The majority of the streams were probably
Settle for Nothing. That's a great protest song.
Yeah, like it's hard to just pick out one album by this band to say is important and to say, and it's just all of it. Like all of it. The fact that it's like the 3 albums, the fact that they had a political message, the fact that they were, bringing hip hop, funk, metal, hardcore, rock, folk, political, with a political, all wrapped up in a political message presented to people. I think that it just sort of changed, mainstream music in a certain way. Artists are more political now, especially nowadays, looking on like Twitter. It's become part of the band or part of an artist. Yeah. You're an actor. What do you think of COVID? What do you think of BLM? Are you going to post a black square? Are you not one of us? Like, it's all of a sudden it's important what all your celebrities, what any of them believe in has become important. And Rage Against the Machine was freaking screaming out their message back in the 90s.
It's like we're finally, as a society, we're finally catching up to them.
Yeah, because they're like, hey, like this is what these people are doing. This is what these people are doing. But now every celebrity's,
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, so I feel like this band is almost even, you can attribute it to a lot of things, not that, politics and celebrities should happen or ever happen. The U.S. just had a celebrity president. But I'm just saying that, like, at the time, it was like a revolutionary, not a revolutionary thing, but just a mainstream band. It was more like a, here your political punk bands and you had your political this, but none of them were winning Grammys for Rock Album of the Year. Or metal album, whatever they won.
Did you want to go next, Ryan, or do you want me to go?
No, I'll go next.
The essential. Go for it.
Yeah, like you were saying, they had such a huge influence in so many different things, but nothing so directly that they sound dated. You know what I mean? Like getting back to that copycat band thing, since there wasn't so much of that, they don't sound dated. So younger listeners could come across them and they won't. I would hope they're not like, oh, this is something gross from the 80s or something. I don't know. Maybe it does sound dated, but just not to me. So that's a hard one. Maybe our younger listeners can inform us about that. But I will say that the band really hit the balance on Evil Empire. So if the band is essential, I would say that's the album, because if you go with either one of the other 2 albums, you're not going to quite get the full. You're not going to get all the little bits that make it great. You'll get other stuff, but you won't get like the funkiness and quite the same kind of guitar-y stuff. Then if you go too far, Battle of Los Angeles, you get, okay, well, these songs are trying to sound the same. I get same guitar riff, blah, blah, blah. So, but Evil Empire, they hit the balance. So if you're going to give, it's hard because everybody's got their own favorite song and album with this band. So I could cop out and say the band's essential, but I'm going to say that this is the balance album. So that's the one you would give. So it's the essential album.
I only copped out because I feel like if we ever talked about any other albums in the future, I'd be very hard pressed to tell people to not advise people to listen to it.
I'll be there to tell them that those ones are essential.
All right, Gordon, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. I think Rage is, as a band, is essential. Everybody should listen to their music. If I had to pick one, though, to me, I'm going to go with the self-title. I think that's the essential. But all three of them, I mean, they're all three great albums. They're all very solid. So it's hard to say that this album's not essential. But definitely the band, any playlist, their message, their vibe is important. I think the other thing that is worth noting is like, it takes these four guys to get together to make this music, and individually or when they're separated, they don't make music that's this good, this catchy, this everything that Rage is. Like, I mean, they have catchy rhymes, and you're singing political messages and calls to action. It's getting you up on your feet. Like, the music is designed to do that. And these guys, I mean, even as like One Day's a Lion, like the side project that Chad has or Zach has, I've listened to it once, but it's not like. You need all the other stuff. It's like, it's just missing all this stuff. So I think these guys together are at their best, and Rage is essential as a band.
Okay. So what is that? So Evil Empire is... I
think we were split 2-1 if we had to.
Yeah, technically.
With some caveats.
So you guys are both zeros, like both non-essentials. That's your...
Oh, no, you guys are essential. I said it was...
I said it was essential.
And he said it was essential.
No, he said the band was
essential. We're all confused with the essential.
Is this album essential?
This album is essential.
This album is essential. Yeah.
Okay, let's say.
Yeah.
Except for Gordon.
If I'm picking one album, if I'm asking the hard question.
You can't ask a question about another album.
You can't ask that question, like, what Rage album would you recommend out of all, like, we all agree Rage is essential. If you had to recommend one album, me and Ryan would recommend Evil Empire, Gordon would recommend Self-Titled.
That's right.
Fair enough. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
So actually, is Killing in the Name of bigger than Bulls on Parade? Like you stated that.
Yep. Well,
yeah, for sure.
It is on Spotify.
Just curious.
And on YouTube, sorry. Like, on everywhere I looked at, Killing in the Name of is sort of like their...
Yeah, it's just because I guess I was just too young when it came out, probably. So Bulls on Parade was on the radio when I was listening and shit.
When Evil Empire came out, I believe there was like hype around it because of the first album. But again, like, we were 11 years old, so for us, we didn't really see the hype. But I do remember the hype before Battle of LA.
I'm just looking on Spotify, and it's like 449 million for Killing in the Name of, and then 206 million for Bulls on Parade, and then it's 3 Battle of Los Angeles songs, which start at 128 million, and then just work their way down. So those songs would be like Guerrilla Radio, Sleep Now in the Fire, and Testify.
Yeah, right.
And those are the biggest
3 songs. Off of Battle of Los Angeles. It's crazy. So none of those earlier tracks, like Bomb Track and stuff, they're like way down the list.
That's why it's it's interesting with this band, because it wasn't like they peaked with one album, or like one album is considered, because there's so little of it. Like, there's only 3 albums, are all so solid that you end up with something like that. Like, 2 of the albums have the 2 most popular songs, but then the rest are from a completely different album.
Yeah.
There's so many good songs on all 3 of these albums. It's hard to just narrow them down to one, but.
So, I mean, we hit on it a little bit at the beginning, kind of talking about like who's gonna copycat, or who's gonna be influenced by this band to make who will be like the future Rages. And it's funny because Zach, a lot of his lyrics were kind of inspired by the Rodney King LAPD beating. So now that we've seen what that moment has started, what do you think these like Black Lives Matter movements and George Floyd, are we going to see that in rock, or do you think we'll see it in rap, or it's going to exist just in different ways?
I think so. I think it will take just a little bit of time before you start seeing it. I was thinking about this because I have a political song. I was gonna release it, and I'm thinking like, man, nobody wants to hear somebody singing about shit that's happening. Like, life isn't a musical. Like, you don't want that.
If it inspires you.
But after some time and reflection, like, people will want to hear a song about it, so I think after like maybe a couple of years, you'll just maybe even just in a year or so.
I think Gordon just spoke to it though, because like with all the BLM George Floyd stuff that happened in the summer of 2020, not only did you have Rage Against the Machine re-entering the charts, which goes to show you like even though if you're not releasing it timely at a timely time, when that time comes, people still remember these songs and go back to them, because not only did Rage enter, so did To Pimp a Butterfly. That re-entered the charts too, and that album was released like what, 10 years ago now? No.
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar's album.
Yeah, so that's like, so it goes to show you, because even that album, I remember some people were lukewarm on when it came out, because like, oh, there's barely even any songs on here. It's just a lot of talking, a lot of like messaging, but listening to it now, it's like, yeah, you should have been fucking listening to what he was saying.
Yeah. We should have been listening to Rage, damn it. If we had Rage Against the Machine earlier.
I mean, well,
all paid attention to Rage.
What's the quote? The best time to listen to Rage was yesterday.
Yeah.
And then one other piece of trivia I just wanted to throw out there. So what do you guys think of this August 2008 Lollapalooza Festival lineup? It's Rage Against the Machine, Radiohead, Nine Inch Nails, and Kanye West in Chicago.
That's insane.
I'm like, when I saw that, it's just like,
I'm surprised I didn't try to go to that.
I know, it's like, we could have did that. Like, that's like, what, an 9-hour drive? We could have did that.
Yeah. I remember.
And it probably was like $100, and it was probably too expensive at like $150. But now it's like, I'll do that right now. I'll give blood for it.
Yeah, that's a sweet lineup.
It's cheap for a concert nowadays, man. Concerts are so fucking expensive. It's not even funny. Like those Rage tickets were like well over $200.
Yeah,
Rage.
What was the ballpark on that? Yeah, 200 for floors. You got floors?
I think it was over 2, and they were not on they were on the floor. But then I refreshed it and I got another ticket like in the stand, and it was the same price. So it was like over $200, because there was a bunch of backlash on Rage when this happened, because they're like, what? You're Rage Against the Machine and you're selling tickets for like $250 for your concert?
Yeah, but
like, especially like
gotta make money.
Ticketmaster. But the thing is, Ticketmaster is the reason why these tickets are so expensive. It's not because of Rage.
That's true. Yeah.
You think it's because of Ticketmaster?
Oh, it's definitely because of Ticketmaster. They're a monopoly.
Well, okay, but they don't set like, who sets the prices for the tickets though?
Well, it's probably like Rage is like, this is what it's going to cost, and then like
then it's their markup, Ticketmaster
I believe
markup.
It goes. You have like the venue, the promoter, and then the artist. So all three of them like get a cut. So the price is negotiated for a split. But the promoter and the venue are all run by the same person, because Ticketmaster and that collective whatever that other company are owned by the same company. And then Ticketmaster also owns the aftermarket ticket company.
Yeah, it's insane.
So it's
I think there's a good YouTube video that breaks all that down. I remember seeing something like that.
Now, but this is
when it was all happening. People were saying like, "Hey, you can't let these companies merge. Like tickets are going to go through the roof." Nobody listened. And at the time, like to go see a regular concert. I remember back in the day, we'd spend like $40 sometimes, $30.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it'll jump to like 70, 80. Now it's like to go even see a show at like the fucking the warehouse back in, I guess it's not there anymore, but just those smaller venue shows, you're looking at $80, $90. Like shows we were paying $40 for.
But you don't see a connection between the collapse of record sales and the spike in ticket sales? Like people are willing to pay these prices, and the bands are willing to charge their fans because they're probably like, nobody's buying the records, so...
Look at, like as much as you say about Kid Rock, he makes his ticket prices affordable for his fans, because he knows his fans are like lower income people. So he has like a cap of like, I think like $20 to go see Kid Rock live. And he does like a full stage show, but he just gets sponsors. So it'll be like Budweiser's, Kid Rock, whatever.
Oh yeah, that's one way of doing it.
But like the tickets are $20. He does like a huge stadium show, and like I've seen like him live on Woodstock and stuff. He does a good show. So it's not like he's a bad performer.
So you would pay less for Rage if they were dressed up in like Coca-Cola suits or something?
No,
well, if they lit them on fire while they were wearing them.
What I'm saying though is like if other bands can come to the ACC and charge $100, I don't see why when you come to the ACC you're charging $250. Not Rage specifically, but just anyway, because there's a range in price between like $60 to fucking $1,000 for a ticket. Like
a supply and demand.
Why is seeing Jay-Z more expensive than seeing
Supply and demand.
Gorillaz. I remember Gorillaz was like $98 or $90 when we saw it, and then I think other people went and saw, was it Kanye and Kendrick? They were headlining, and it was like $300 a ticket. Like, it was ridiculous.
I went to that.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you're one of these people that went.
Those are general market forces, but so, supply and demand. But what sets the bar for that? Yeah, I don't know. I can't help but think that it's not a coincidence that record sales collapsed and then ticket prices.
Can we tell Vince he can stop recording?
I guess, don't know. Vince, are you listening to everything we say?
Or should we say, like, goodbye?
Bye, Vince. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Essential Albums podcast, and that one was recorded in January. Next week, we dive into Canadian indie legends Arcade Fire with their breakout album, Funeral. You can find us on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts, and give us a follow on Instagram at the Essential Albums Podcast. Original music by me and artwork by Vincent Tran.